morning, Kevin McCullough. Glad you're with us. Happy Monday to you. We're off and running. It's a brand new week. There's a live shot of 46th and 7th. If you're watching by way of television, the busyness, the frenetic activity of New York. Oh, great. I have now shown them and there's no one there. Just kidding. We've got a lot of interesting things to talk about. Should a mom who tries to sell her baby at Taco Bell be more morally judged or less harshly judged than Casey Anthony, who just got out of prison yesterday? We'll talk about that in the Practical Dilemma. In the news hour this morning, the White House budget director, for those of you that get Social Security check, whether that's disability or retirement, whatever it is that you depend upon Social Security for, he went on Candy Crowley yesterday, and she asks him the question, I don't know, 6 ways to Sunday, and for the life of him, he can't seem to get an answer out on it. And I'm just curious how that is resonating with people that use Social Security. And so for those of you that fall into that category, I want to hear from you when we get to that topic. When you see his duck and dodge routine, what does that tell you about what's coming up August 2nd? Also, there's this very weird new toy. And I got to tell you, when Carrie and I are going through the topics, there's this consistent theme out there about this particular, the whole topic of breastfeeding. We did a segment on it, I don't know, last week or 2 weeks ago, and some of the reaction I got was so heated, so violently supportive of breastfeeding, and anything that was critical of it whatsoever was seen as like somehow doing the devil's work. But I honest to goodness think that we got a problem in the whole breastfeeding area, in this universe. And 7, 8-year-old kids, I'm sorry, that's not necessary anymore. But forget that for a second. That's a whole different topic. There's this toy that wants to train your daughter. I guess you could train your son, too. It's, that's the way toys are nowadays. So your children, it's made for your children who can breastfeed, pretend breastfeed the baby that comes with the apparatus. All right, so that's all before we're done on the show today. Thank you for being here. Well, before we get into any of that craziness, let's get to a God thought, because God Life News in that order for that reason. Here on the Kevin McCullough Show. And God is the source of truth, the origin of truth, the foundation, the wellspring. Everything we need to know comes from Him. And we would be better off if we planned on staying in tune with Him. So what I want to do is every day direct our thoughts to Him as we prepare to deal with everything else that comes our way in life. And so that's why we start with the God thought. The binge thinking process, you know that we're all about developing binge thinking here. Think, believe, act, impact. It's a four-step process. If you want to have impact in this world, and you will, either for good or bad, but if you think about things, they shape your belief system. Your beliefs shape your behaviors leave your impact. So think, believe, act, impact. It's all one destination that ends to your reputation. What did you end up doing in life? Were you a force for good, for the kingdom? Were you a force for not so good? In the process of that, what we think about, what we think on, is where it all starts. That's why we start on Truth About God with the Early Morning God Thought. In 2011, we've been going through the book, He's God and We're Not, available at keepbelieving.com for a free download. You can get that. That's Ray Pritchard, the author of the book. It's his website. They've got it in the Amazon Kindle, the Barnes & Noble Nook, or you can just print it as a PDF to your computer. You can also get it for the iPad, the iPhone, the iTouch, the whatever. I'm sure they'll have something new coming out soon. The iChip. But anyway, we've been working our way through the 4 spiritual laws. We're into the 5th spiritual law now that he talks about in the book. And we have seen chapter by chapter how God has a unique place and man has a unique place. And the first 3 laws dealt with God's sovereignty. He's God and we're not. He doesn't need us. We desperately need Him. God supplies what He demands. Then we turned the corner and took a look at man's role in the relationship. and we discovered that what we seek, we find. And we're on to the second step of the human portion of this element, that active faith releases God's power. And we just started it last week, but let's take a look at today's God Thought, the second in the Active Faith Releases God's Power chapter in He's God and We're Not by Dr. Ray Pritchard. He writes, the same faith that saves us is the faith that carries us from day to day as we make the journey from earth to heaven. Let me read that again. The same faith that saves us is the faith that carries us from day to day as we make the journey from earth to heaven. In the actual book, Ray sets this thought up by talking about how many times in evangelical circles, as opposed to Catholic, there is this thought about faith that says it's kind of a one-time deal. You come, you put your faith in Jesus, and then you go from there. And there's not the idea of continuing in faith day to day. That's a little bit more of a Catholic idea in some ways. We're just, in evangelical circles, there's not as much thought of the continuation of your faith as you go through it. But I like to think of faith as paralleling my relationship with Christ. And so if I have an ongoing relationship with Christ, the act that I engage, the fact that I engage that relationship, I think is demonstration of that faith in who He is. If I didn't have faith in who He was, I would cease to. I don't have much reason to trust, deal with, etc., etc. And people that have lost faith in others, that can be a very devastating thing to relationships. You know that. You've had disappointments where someone has betrayed you, let you down. It's been a huge fiasco, and you come away saying, "Wow, I just expected so much better out of that." It's never that way with God, because He can never separate Himself. He doesn't push away from us. And if we are engaging Him, we will constantly see that everything that He's told us is true, and that everything He does we can depend upon, and that our trust in Him grows deeper and more important the longer we go. But to Ray's point, we still don't usually think of our faith in a day-to-day sort of sense. The same faith that saves us is the faith that carries us from day to day as we make the journey from earth to heaven. That's a long journey. That's a journey that, if you come to faith in the young part of your life, you have maybe many years before you depart this earth and are actually in the presence of God. I know that now we can't really talk about concepts of heaven and hell, because there's people that want you to go to heaven but don't believe heaven exists. They believe that once you become a Christian, like just the joy that you have in this life is all that heaven is. You do have joy in this life, and you can find contentment and peace and the ability to persevere and spiritual resources you've never had before, and that is all absolutely true. You become a new person and all things are made new. But I still believe that heaven is an ultimate destination, that we'll be reunited with those that name the name of Jesus as their Savior as well, that we will sit at His footstool, that we will worship Him for eternity. But what is that we are engaging, that same faith that saves us? Well, it takes on different characteristics, at least from my perspective. And you may disagree. You can send me your thoughts, kmcradio@gmail.com. If you've got any reaction to this, you want to put it into writing, kmcradio@gmail.com. You can also call us, 877-572-8446, and weigh in on your thoughts and ideas right now. But here's a little bit of where I'm coming from on this. Engaging that same faith that saves us, to me, is very simple. It's obedience to who He is in my life. And we don't like the word obey, and we don't like the word obedience, and we don't like to submit, and we don't like to admit we're wrong, and we don't like to admit that we're not sufficient, and we don't like to admit a lot of things. But that doesn't make us right, because we don't like them. I have a friend sent me a note yesterday, a very talented musician. plays in a group that is hired for weddings all over the place in the New York metro area. And recently, New York State passed a law by which homosexual weddings can now be performed throughout the state. And it is this music group's feeling, they are not all believers in the group, that they will be solicited and hired or attempted to be hired for such occasions. This person happens to be the only Christian in the group of musicians that are in this group. And so the question came, what should I do? I'm in desperate need of income. This is how I support my family. What do I do? And I just asked the person, I said, well, take a step back. Needing income is important. We all understand that. It's a rough economy. It's been a horrible year. It's been a horrible 2.5 years, economically speaking. But take a larger vision question. When you have kids, do you want your kids down the road saying, hey, if those unions aren't honoring to God, why did you go to so many when you were younger? There's a hesitancy to not put food on the table because there's a worry about faith in God being sufficient to supply needs that taking a path of compromise might lead to. And so this person was wisely asking for insight. But I think that activating that faith is saying, God, I'm going to trust and obey you above all else today. More thoughts on the God Thought? Check it out. TheBingeThinker.com. Gavin McCullough coming right back.